absolutely everyone has the ability to connect to spirit and angels.
It's not just thinking that, okay, I know everything. It's being open to learning, but it's also then being able to then give back to others are in a different place on their journey. There's something really beautiful about that.
People come to me for all kinds of things. They'll often come to me for really wherever they're stuck and it just doesn't make sense.
Hi, Alisha. Thank you for coming to Therapize.
Hi, Lalita. I am absolutely delighted to be here.
I am so excited for this conversation. We have just touched base and there's already my mind is blown with some of the comments and some of the conversations that we've already started. So I was like, let's just start the conversation and start understanding more about what you do and more about your background. So I suppose I'm really interested in this. Your name, Dr. Alisha Das. Is that the right pronunciation for that?
Very close. Das. Yes, you said the last name right. Dr. Alisha Das. Please just call me Alisha. It is Alisha, the Indian version of Alisha, not the very common Spanish version. So I am, as we were talking, so delightedly, I am half Indian, East Indian. You know, it's silly that I still have to say East Indian, but it is, there it is. And half English. So my mother born to a very fair, platinum blonde, Southern belle mother and a very dark East Indian father. And, you know, I love I always felt like I was a bridge. And while there's a lot of persecution, you know, I grew up in rural Indiana and literally the Ku Klux Klan would collect on the street corners, collect money on the street corners. That was legal. Full robes, as long as our hoods weren't on, that was legal. And they would bang on our car because you had a platinum blonde, you know, very fair white woman with an Indian, obviously father with 3 kids in the back, and they would bang on our windows. And obviously it was terrifying, but secretly I loved being a blend of 2 cultures. You know, my dad.
And Alicia, you just mentioned it's like the bridge. What do you mean by the bridge?
Oh gosh, in so many ways, I really consider myself a bridge. That's my calling. So I'm a bridge between East and West, because goodness gracious, Lalita, there's so much exclusion and judgment and you're not like me. And I so grew up with that, desperately wishing I had blonde hair and blue eyes, because rural Indiana, you know, I won't say what year it was, but it was a long time ago. And yes, it was the 60s and 70s. And do you know, gosh, can we not just come together? Just the other day, someone was like, well, I'm a Christian, so I can't support your work. I've literally hired them to do my Instagram. And I'm like, I'm an ordained Christian minister for 35 years. What do you mean? And they're like, well, you work with angels. I'm like, did you know that angels are mentioned in the Bible 246 times? And they're like, wow, there's this one passage, you know, thou shalt not, you know, worship angels or your own passion. I'm like, I don't worship angels. Angels are messengers of God. But I don't mean to make that wrong, all just to say, angels bring us together. You know, there was a recent poll by the Associated Press and the NORC, which is a nonpartisan group out of the University of Chicago, showing, and this is July 2023, showing that 75% of the world believe in angels. That transcends culture, religion, faith, no faith, culture, gender. Do you know? So when I say I'm a bridge.
That's huge, isn't it? That is really big. So you showing up, being this bridge, you being born with different cultures and growing up with 2 different cultures, but also wishing that you were something different. It's almost like that became part of your journey into realizing, actually, yeah, I've grown up wanting to be different, but also realizing we're all human at the end of it. We're all the same. We're all human. And it feels like that's the message that you're here to try and share and be that bridge for everyone to see that we're just all human underneath everything.
Well, exactly, Lolita. we're all just human. And you know, I was speaking with a gentleman today, and he told me a brilliant quote. Unfortunately, I don't remember the author, but he said, that which is the most deeply personal is the most universal. That which is most deeply personal is the most universal. And it's really true. Our secret hurts and shames, yeah, we change, you know, cultures and religions and you know, skin, but we're all sourced of the same substance, which is whether we want to call that God or spirit or higher power or love, is the same.
Yeah. And you said you worked with angels. What do you mean by that? For anyone who doesn't understand what that means, what does that mean?
Well, really, I work with spirit for forever. I've been a professional spiritual intuitive. But right now, angels have always been the heart and soul of what I do. I mean, the heart and soul is God, spirit, the numinous, heaven, whatever we want to call it, that which is higher within us. But I work with angels very specifically, in a very specific manner. I work with people to connect with angels because angels are a bridge. Speaking of bridges, angels really help us turn up the volume on that still small voice, which is pretty darn still and small, you know, in this world of distractions. They're messengers of God. And again, as I was sharing, they are bridges. They bring us together. So I hear and speak the angelic language, which is a language we can hear and speak, and I have since I was a very tiny child. And when I was younger and even when I was older, I thought I was crazy because I kept hearing these beautiful sounds, but they just took me into this blissful state. At some point, I realized what it was. And so I work with people to connect in a very direct way, not just to angels, but to the very highest great archangels, of which there are very few. And the whole point of it is not just to connect to a high archangel, which is pretty beautiful in and of itself. Again, there are bridges. They are bridges to God, to making God, again, spirit, heaven, the deep source of nature, whatever we want to call it, tangible as love or as tangible as the flowers in my garden, in a way that we can receive it and in a way that is not quite the long distance call that God or spirit can be.
And it sounds like you're so connected with that. You're so connected being that bridge between God, the angels, but also communicating what you hear, the messages that you get for individuals to give them support, guidance. Is that what you do when you're supporting people? Do you give them messages? Do you give them insights? Like, what is it that you help people with, or how do you support them when they come to you?
Well, I am a consciousness nerd. Just ask my kids. So I do lots of things. I have way too many degrees, including a doctorate in counseling. But really, my heart and soul is as a spiritual intuitive. But the reason I did all the work in psychology, the education in psychology, and then the practice in it, is because I wanted to put roots under people's wings, so that.
Oh, how beautiful is that? I want to put roots under people's wings. That is beautiful.
Thank you. You know, my whole family, I'm half Indian, and you know, my dear, since you're Indian, everybody's doctors are lawyers. So my family chose medicine. Everybody's doctor. Brother, sister, father. My parents met over a cadaver. How romantic is that? You know, so I was pre-med, which at some point I realized that was just a reflex. My point being, so I come from a scientific family. And then at the same time, I'm hearing these, all these other languages and these voices. So you can imagine how well that went over. And
What did you tell your parents? And when you did, that you were hearing these different sounds and hearing these messages, like what went on? Like how old were you when you first started hearing these messages, and what went on for you?
I was 4. And when I'm probably before that, but that's when I consciously remember it. And I did not tell anybody for a long time, because when I started, I think that was a protection, because I don't think they could have heard it. In rural Indiana, you're Christian, that's pretty much your option. My dad was Hindu, but he was Indian, so he was, allowed. And then of course he had to become a Christian. Secretly, he was a Hindu Christian, which is absolutely something I think you can be, but Christians didn't think so. And I don't mean to, again, I'm an ordained Christian minister. I don't mean to be disparaging of anyone, because God comes to us in the way we can receive. So to answer your question, I started hearing messages and I started writing. It came through writing. And it freaked everybody out, because I started writing down things I couldn't know as a child.
Like what? What was? Give me an example of something that you remember writing down,
Secrets
and
that
someone
people
was
had
like,
been
ah,
keeping.
wow.
I wrote about what it was like to give birth in such detail. It was like a woman who'd given birth writing it, and I was 9. So things like that. And yeah, so when you see terror on your mother's face, you realize you need to keep quiet. And so I did until I left home, really at 15, to go to a boarding school to get out of rural Indiana.
But then, so all that time, you were still receiving these messages, still hearing these sounds, but just trying to ignore it and suppress it out.
Which I did a
Wow.
good job of, because who was I going to talk to about it? So I really didn't open it up until I started writing again at 15, and then I didn't really open it up until I was about 20, 21. And because then I was out of the house, I was in New York City, then the New Age movement was coming to the fore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then people didn't tell me I was crazy quite so much, you know?
Look how powerful that is. Like just the messages that we get from the surroundings around us, and the messages or the distress that you saw from mom, and knowing that, okay, I better not say anything or do anything, but not realizing perhaps mom didn't even know what was going on and what was happening, and felt confused or overwhelmed. But as a child, we take that on board thinking, I better stop because I'm clearly distressing. So let me just not show up in that way. And then, like you said, here you are, like in New York City, opening up and sharing, and people are accepting of that. And it just starts allowing you to show up in a very different way.
It absolutely does. And, I think that's the beautiful thing about where our world is going, is we are starting to support our youth more to open up to the numinous, to be different, to celebrate our differences. And that my passion in my work, so the way I approach angels, so my first book is called Your Archangelic Ancestry: Discover Your Angelic Name, Heritage, and Higher Purpose, which sounds like a strange confluence of things to put together, but
Is it really strange? I think it's really fascinating, because often people are looking for their purpose, or they're looking to make meaning of their life, but sometimes we have to go back to move forward. So it feels like it's a guide or a support system to help people, just giving them insights into things that they may not understand.
and things they've been experiencing but haven't had names for it. The to tell you about really the deepest way on the bridge. In my experience, and it's been a very strong experience, and one I confirmed with some spiritual teachers. In my experience, the angelic and the human are becoming one, eventually in consciousness. Now, what that allows us to do is to access our angelic acumen and selves right within us so that we can embody the qualities we all love about angels: oneness with God, kindness, inclusion, beauty, grace, etc., rather than looking outside. It's really looking inside and accessing our ability to be a messenger of God ourselves. Because angel means messenger.
Yeah. And if someone comes to you and like you said, there was someone that was speaking to you and they were like, I can't work with you, sorry, because you're speaking about angels. How do you manage people that don't understand the language that you speak? Because there's a lot of people out there that are going to think angels because it's out of their depth. They don't understand it, they don't get it, and they don't want to. So it's easier to then shut it down. How do you, as a practitioner, as someone who hears and believes so strongly in what you do, how do you manage that with people who don't get it?
Yeah, I love that question. Well, and to clarify, that person wasn't coming to me as a counselor or a coach or a facilitator. They were coming to me. They were simply a social media manager, and so. But I do get that. I was just on ABC, and I I got a lot of positive stuff, but I also got people telling me I was going to hell, which is super awesome. Um, I really.
But that's a lot, isn't it? That's big. Like I know people even in the UK who they talk about the psychic side or they talk about the spiritual side and they talk about this higher self. And because people don't seem to understand it or it feels like it's not scientific, what they tend to do is like, no, 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 we don't want to know about that. We don't want to know. But there's so much power in it. And the amount of people that you've helped and supported throughout your journey. I mean, you said you've been doing it for 37 years. This is the work, the beautiful work you've been doing, and all the souls that you've been working with. They are there, they get it, they see it. But what about all these other people that are there, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I have two answers to that. How I handle it inwardly and how I handle it outwardly. Inwardly, I go deep into spirit, which is a strong relationship after cultivating it for so many decades now. I moved into ashram when I was 23. So this has been my lifelong passion and focus, or at least certainly my adult life. And so I go deep into spirit, and I really allow the truth that is God and that is spirit, that is love, to heal me. And I will go look at childhood wounds where, somebody told me I was crazy. I'll look at yesterday where somebody told me I was crazy and work to heal that. So before I respond to that person, so that I can respond with neutrality, compassion, and love. Because I'll make it personal, either done everything or under the right circumstances incapable of anything. So who am I? I don't know enough to judge. I might think I do, but I don't know enough to judge. If I could get above and look at all the karmic intricacies, then I might know enough to judge, but then of course I wouldn't judge. So that's my inner process first. Get as neutral as I can. My outer process then is to get curious, to get open and to say, well, tell me more. Now, of course, if they're open, it would be tell me more, let's have a dialogue. If they're not, then it's bless you and I'm not for you, or my membership group is not for you, my book is not for you. Bless you on your journey. And have passion for honestly, my perception is the pain they may be feeling to have to say you're wrong. How are they telling themselves they're wrong? Because our outer environment reflects our inner environment. So, it may be that we're not a fit. That's great, or it may be like, what am I going to learn by this discussion? Let me.
I think that's so beautiful. I think that's so beautiful that you can take that away as like, hang on, what's actually going on here? Rather than reacting, it's almost like, and that's the beautiful work that you've been doing all over the years, and the inner work that you've been doing, which is, what's this teaching me? What's going on here? What's stuff that's coming up for me, but what's their stuff? And trying to make sense of it to be able to then move forwards. Introducing our exclusive newsletter, your weekly dose of inspiration, insights, and empowerment. Each week we deliver curated content straight to your inbox, and this is designed to help you navigate life's challenges and thrive. Join our community of like-minded individuals who are committed to personal growth and self-discovery. Subscribe now to start your journey towards a happier, more fulfilling life. Don't miss out.
And to realize that if I'm in any kind of negative reaction, school's in session. There's some for me to heal. You know, my favorite spiritual precept is use everything for your spiritual advancement, learning, and growth.
Yeah. So say if someone came to you and what would normally people come to you for, and how would you then support them through things?
People come to me for all kinds of things. They'll often come to me for really wherever they're stuck and it just doesn't make sense. Like I have this big following, but I tend to work with a lot of coaches and counselors and facilitators, thought leaders, and that kind of thing. 99% of which I can't name because of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. But they'll come to me when it's like, I have all this outer success, but it's not going in. And what's my next steps? Who am I? What's my next level of service? Or how do I connect to God? A lot of people will, they'll come in the second half of life of like, well, I've achieved this success. I have the family, I have this, I have that. There's something missing. And even if they've been on a
And is that different for everyone? Like that missing thing? Because I often hear that people get to like a certain point, they've made it in terms of like financially, they feel like I've done everything that I thought I needed to do, but I still feel this like emptiness or this like loss, or this feels like there's something missing. But do you feel like that's the same for a lot of individuals, or do you feel like everyone has something different that they're seeking?
Well, again, that which is deeply personal is the most universal. So, yes and no. Yes, ultimately, we are all the same and have the same hurt because we're ultimately all one being. We're ultimately the collective of love, one love. So what I love to do in my classes and workshops is I'll work with a group, but then when I work with one person, because we do need to get specific. No, we don't all have the past lives. No, we don't all have the same wounds. No, we don't all have the same heritage. So I'll work with one person, but then I will continually talk to everyone and say, okay, who's experienced deep shame because because of something you're not even sure about that is in your unconscious, so I'll work to help heal the whole group through the individual.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Thank you.
And very beautiful. It's like a real collective way of working, like noticing or bringing it together. So you say you do workshops. Is it that you do workshops one-to-one as well?
I do one-to-one, but I have a long wait list in the years, and I'm now phasing out of doing one-to-one and doing a coaching group and a membership, which are at different levels. So the coaching group is more for people who really want to go in deep. They want to go esoteric. They want to be practitioners themselves, or they are practitioners. And then the membership group is more for people who really want to know more about their own intuition. My big passion is being people's cheerleaders and being people's cheerleader to go directly to spirit, to be an intuitive themselves, to serve perhaps in silence which is equally needed, and to sit in that experience of spirit and irradiate, to speak peace into the collective. That's as valuable a service as being a thought leader and having millions of followers.
Yeah.
If not more.
And do you think that from your past life and like you understanding more about yourself, do you feel like there's a reason why you've come into this lifetime with the ability to be able to connect to the angelic world?
Of course, just like I think that we all come in with a higher purpose, and so helping people connect to their higher purpose is very much a passion. But yes, I do believe that this life, I incarnated, I took embodiment to help bridge the angelic and human levels so that the worlds can come together, just like East and West can come together, just like Christians and Buddhists can come together. Angels and humans angels do. We all have guardian angels. We all have those amazing stories of like, oh my gosh, I'd have died in that car accident. Yet, at the last minute, the car was moved aside by an unseen hand. Well, I posit that unseen hand came through winged brethren. And so, yes, I believe that I incarnated to help bridge the angelic and human and to help people really know how deeply they are loved.
And do you feel like that's a passion and that's a mission that you are currently achieving?
What a great question. You have the best questions, Lalita.
I'm curious. I'm always curious. I'm like, what's this? And what's this? And what's this? Some people are like, just stop, just leave it.
No, you could ask me anything. Do I feel like I've achieved it? Well, let me ask Spirit. I believe I have achieved it to a certain level. I've been very willing, sometimes not willing, but very willing to do that in a very inner way. Now, I've pretty much lived in meditation and workshops and working with clients. I haven't done anything to take it out into it's all been word of mouth, etc. People are like, you kind of like make people have to look for you, which is not intentional. It's just been more that hasn't been my focus. And then they pretty much, God, angels, whatever you want to call it, pretty much kicked my butt and was like, okay, time to go serve in a greater way. And I kind of said no. And I'm afraid I don't want to. What they will call me crazy, they will. And then they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, which is I was dying. I had cancer. I had very aggressive cancer. This was 10 years ago. And so, an adult. And I knew why I created it. So my doctor called me very early in the morning. And it's not like I wasn't doing anything. And by that time, I'd done at least 250 workshops to the public. But again, I didn't market. You had to know me or know someone who knew me or whatever, So yeah, I've been, and but I was kind of hiding. I was married to a man who had a big standing in the spiritual community. And I was pretty much just supporting his work. He was the practitioner for my guru, my spiritual teacher at the time, and many other thought leaders. So it was like, oh, I'll support him.
Why do you think you did that? At that point in time, why do you feel like you were in the shadows? You weren't ready to be seen. What was the avoidance of that?
Partly, I was involved in a very patriarchal organization. And no, not casting any dispersions. It's a beautiful organization, but love, the Indian gurus. It's mostly men, and it's very much
It's mostly men, and I have an issue with that because I'm like, come on, women, where are you?
Right? And there are a few female. There's, Amma.
Yeah,
There's the
it's changing. It is changing.
changing slowly. I had Sadhvi Saraswati. Do you know her? On my podcast, and it's changing. But goodness gracious, it's a little slow. And so probably my Indian roots and just whatever, I didn't think that I should be the one up front. And kind of others agreed with me in terms of like, my husband was, it's like, well, he could go sit on the stage, but I couldn't, partly because I was a woman and partly because I hadn't been out there. I've been quietly working with people for decades, but quietly. And so
but also, like you said, subconsciously, like growing up in an Indian household, and I know that there was mixed sort of culture, but was it more of dad's side of like, right, we need you to be like this or need to be like this, or was there that sort of like going on? Was there rules that you felt like you had to comply by?
my parents divorced when I was very young, 4, which is when I started hearing the angels.
I was going to say that's the same time you started having these messages.
So I still saw my dad, but it was more this glass ceiling that was put on me, or I put on myself, because ultimately we create, promote, and allow everything. So that was more as an adult being very involved in this spiritual community, where again the leaders were the men and the spiritual teacher was the teacher, and if you were not him, you were a follower. And again, I don't mean to cast dispersions, that's just how it was.
No, I understand it.
And so, but I did do these events. I would go and sit on the stage next to my husband, but I really would mostly support him. I would produce all the events. I was managing the business. I was taking care of the kids. I was working with clients, but I was kind of in his shadow. I wasn't really doing my work, the work that I had to do.
I think a lot of women would relate to that. There's a lot of women that even now would relate to what you've just shared, the story of like essentially you being the backbone, and doing everything and making sure everything's all working in the way that it is, but no one really seeing that that's what you're doing.
100%. And it's kind of my personality. I love to serve. But then when my doctor called me and told me that I had cancer, I knew, well, my first response was, oh no. My second response was, I know exactly why I have created this. So I said to him, I just need a little bit of time to cure this, to heal this. So you can imagine how that went over. He's like,
what was his response to that?
You just need a little bit of time to schedule a surgery. And then Spirit intervened, and my fancy Beverly Hills doctor lost my pathology slides, misplaced them. And so that gave me the time I needed. So I went and I worked very assiduously with it used to be called Oriental medical doctor, now traditional Chinese medical doctor. And he'd been my client for 5 years. And he was the practitioner for the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So he was very high level. And he knew my work very well because I'd been working with him for 5 years. This was the first time I went to him as a doctor. And he basically said, not on my watch. You're not dying on my watch. And so he laid me down on this bamboo mat and started piercing my skin with acupuncture needles. And he said, what would it take for you to completely fulfill your spiritual calling of bridging the angelic and the human completely? And all of a sudden, everything turned into light. I couldn't see, all I could see were his hazel eyes. Everything else was light. It felt like about 1 million angels entered the room. My body literally lifted up and off the mat, up and down, in purifying movements, kriyas. And I said, I would need to be completely utilized by the angels. I would need to do my work, God's work through me, not just support my husband. I would need to write books. And he said, "Will you?" And I said, "Yes." And that's when everything changed. I started working closely with him. I didn't do any allopathic intervention, but I gave myself permission to really do my work, to really come forward. And it's been a process, but
But even what you just said there, something really powerful. I gave myself permission. That's huge. I gave myself permission to finally set myself free and step into my power. That's essentially what you started to do. And when you did that, it's almost like I can write books. I can show up. I can help people. I can be someone sat on stage. I can also show up in this way. Whereas before it was very much like, oh, I'm not able, not that you're not able to, but did you ever think that you could do that?
I did. I thought I could do that. I knew I couldn't do that in the current environment in which I was in, that I would
Okay.
have to break out
And
of that.
is that okay? And is that what you did? Did you then break out of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in the process of that. Again, it. As you know, I've now written the first book, and I have a second book as well. Thank you, love. So, and I did start doing some solo workshops, and I started doing some webinars, and it's gone slower than I might have liked, but I've also been very much deepening in my craft, and really opening myself now to be utilized. And when I have done much more public things, I've been really delighted. And this is the thing that I'm so passionate about, Lolita, is people are ready. Like, it is not just the people in this organization or the priestcraft or the intuitives or the psychics or oh my God, Lolita, they are ready. People on the street, people coming to the webinars, like they're ready. They're ready. They're ready. They're right. They're ready to go, "Oh my gosh, I had this experience when I was 6 and I'm open to it now. I had an experience with whatever, the ETs. I had an experience with angels. I had an experience with spirit." And they're now feeling safer to come out and be all of who they are. And I think that us having our own wounding and being, even, this is a strong word, but persecuted, helps us now relate to people's fear to be all of who they are, however that looks.
So do you think that when we have our woundings, that's where if we do our work and if we understand exactly what's happened in our life and really being able to step into like our shadows, that's where we then are able to move forward, but not just move forwards and live our life, but also move forwards and give permission to other people and allow them to also then start working on themselves and understanding more about what's gone on for them. Because I'm sure there's loads of people out there who have had connections with spirit, connections with angels, but they've never understood it or they don't know what it's about. And in the world that we live in, sometimes it's like, oh, what do you mean you've had like messages or you've had this? And they quickly shut it down. But do you feel like everyone has the ability to connect to spirit or connect to angels? Or do you feel like it's more of there's certain people?
Both, and absolutely everyone has the ability to connect to spirit and angels. A million trillion percent. Absolutely. And let's empower them. It's not so much, yes, of course, connecting, but it's trusting the connection, trusting their own attunement, not feeling like they have to go through someone else, but connecting directly. And, there are people where that's been their focus. that's been their craft, that's been their calling. So they may have, you know, an Eckhart Tolle or an Amma or a Sadhguru. I'm just trying to mention people from lots of different faiths, right?
No, I
Although those
get
were
that.
all Indians. A Saint John of the Cross mentioning somebody who died. Tom.
I love how mindful you are. I love how mindful you are.
Thank you, love. You know, those are, but people who are whatever faith, we do all have our teachers. We all have our teachers, and I love learning from people like that. I love learning from, we can learn from anything, right? From anyone if we're open. So it's both and. Absolutely, we all have the power to connect. And I'm really grateful for those people who are masters, right? So I can learn from them. There's the thing of you teach the people coming behind you and you learn from the people in front of you.
There's something really powerful about that is not just thinking that, okay, I know everything. It's being open to learning, but it's also then being able to then give back to others who are in a different place on their journey. There's something really beautiful about that comment that you've just made.
But it's true, my dear. It's like we're all just walking each other home, to paraphrase Ram Dass, my namesake. Although I was born with it, he adopted it.
What's the meaning of it? There's a meaning. I know there is.
Absolutely. Das means servant of God. And if you put a in front of it, like Ram Das means servant of Ram.
Yeah, there's Ram Dass. I've heard.
Krishna Das. It's actually pronounced Krishna. Krishna Das is servant of Krishna. So whatever name, you could be Jesus Das, although probably not because, but you could be. So servant of God. So I didn't even know what my own name meant until I met my spiritual teacher when I was 23. I was an actress and I'd always wanted to change my name because at the time, now it's cool and exotic, but at the time you needed to be Jacqueline Smith or Robert Redford. You needed to be very Western. And I was very not. And so I always wanted to change my name and I could never figure out what to change it to. And then I met my spiritual teacher and the first thing he said is, "What's your name?" And I said, "Alisha Das." And he said, "That means servant of God." And I knew why I had never changed it. And of course that is what.
Yeah. Isn't that so powerful? That's just giving me goosebumps. That's beautiful. Sometimes I think we fight against things and we say, I don't want this, and we resist it. But that thing that we're resisting is actually teaching us something, or there's meant to be something for it. But there's always a time, isn't there, for it to come out and us to realize the like connecting the dots and being like, I get this now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Just like you said earlier, you said, it's going slower than it needs to. And I wonder if that's, again, it's a process, and eventually you'll connect the dots and you'll be like, I understand why now.
And I think that's really true, because, I really am aware that I can really serve now in a way I couldn't have even 5 years ago.
And imagine where you'll be in another 5 years. Like the more that you're really stepping into this, it feels like you're really just embracing it. And I feel it from you. I really do. And that's why when I reached out, I was like, I love everything on your website, the way that you're connecting with the world. And you're another fellow Hay House author, and we take the same values from Louise Hay. Like there's some real power in what she says. And I really do feel like we all connect for a reason underneath that publisher.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love her ethos, right? And she was very inclusive and very empowering of people. And it's not like she went out to start what Hay House is now. She just wanted to serve. She just wanted to help her fellow authors. And so tell me about you as a fellow Indian and having written, I can see your book behind you. I can't quite see, it's high functioning anxiety.
High
High
functioning.
functioning.
High functioning anxiety, that explains it all, doesn't it? Like that's it, is when you grow up in a household where there are specific ways of complying, and it's more about like what are people going to be saying, how are the community, so we learn to live outwards rather than living inwards. And when you mentioned that earlier about your work, is that people are learning to come home, people are learning to go back inside and really connect deeply with their values. But if you're constantly taught to live outwards and to make sure that everyone else around you is happy, that's what you then end up doing until you get to a point where you're exhausted, you're tired, you're frustrated with life, and you're like, what am I doing? Like, this is exhausting. And it's only then people have the ability to start looking, because they're forced in some ways. Like they literally have to hit this brick wall and they have to start looking within, because there's nothing to move forwards to. They're tired, they're frustrated, they're lonely, they're resentful. And when they start looking within, that's where they start seeking these answers of like, hang on, there's another way. And how is it that I have never been able to connect to like all these other parts of me? And it's often because we've suppressed them down and you've never been able to tap into them. So even when you spoke about tapping in at 23 and going to your spiritual teacher, because you went there for a reason, because you're ready to understand more, to dive in and try and make sense of all this stuff that's gone on, and also looking more at yourself and going inwards. I think it's such a powerful journey of inwards. And when you shared about that's what more and more people want, people are ready for it. I believe that, and I feel that like people are so ready to want to live authentically. But to live authentically, we need to bring our high functioning side that we are in the world versus what's going on inside of us together.
That's just beautifully, gorgeously said. I couldn't agree more. And you know what I love about your title, High Functioning Anxiety, is there's such a radical acceptance with it. It's like, oh, I have this part that's anxious, but every negative has a positive, right? We're stubborn or we're determined. And how can our shadow side be walked into the light and illumined and seen, oh, you're not a shadow. You're really just a scared child that nobody's hugged you and updated you, that you're beautiful.
And that's exactly it. Like, and my book deep dives into this, is we have to go back into our inner child, and the shadows that we feel. Sometimes it's like that little child who's so afraid of the monster. Like, there's a monster in my room, and there's no monster in your room, and you look under the bed, there's no monster there. And they're like, yeah, there's a monster, and you're just like, there isn't. And that's how we are as adults. We still have this idea of this shadow being like this huge monster, and we do anything to just try and avoid it. But I find often it's because people keep doing that because they don't know how to go through or how to work with the shadow self. They just know that there's something there that they're not they're uncomfortable with it. They're big emotions, so it's easier to leave it there until they get to that brick wall, and then they're like, okay, it's interfering with my life in so many ways, in my relationships. It's interfering in my life, in my working environment as well, where you're a people pleaser, you're a perfectionist, you're dimming yourself. You're not giving yourself permission to be yourself because it's scary to do so. So it's like you have to start looking into what's living beneath that. Why is it that you're not wanting to put yourself out there? What's stopping you from doing that? And I think we're all on these life journeys where everyone's journey is so different. But yeah, we're all here on the same mission, which is we're taking each other home. And I thought that was beautiful when you said.
Well, again, I'm paraphrasing Ram Dass. We're all just walking each other home, but it's so true. I mean, there's a reason that God individuated into souls, and then there's a reason that we have different paths and thoughts and feelings and even the conflict, How do we, and that's why I did start learning about psychology and getting degrees in psychology, because, for example, Gestalt therapy, I think is so beautiful, where we give those disowned parts of us a voice. And then invariably, what they're ultimately, first, the voice might be kind of rusty, like turning on a faucet after it's been off for decades. The water comes out rusty and kind of sputtering, and then eventually it comes out clear if we can just listen with love and curiosity. And invariably, just a part of us got retarded back at a certain age because of some trauma we couldn't face head on. And once we give it a voice and heal it, it's like that part's going this way and we're going that way. We start to, even walk ourselves home in that single line to the light.
Honestly, it's so powerful what we're capable of doing in this world when we stop running away from ourselves and we start focusing on these parts of ourselves that we're ignoring, but also where is it that we want to go? And we start, like you said, bringing it together. And when you bring it together, you show up with permission, just like you are, Alisha, right now, just like I am as well. Like I've been on this journey where I'm like, I don't want to step in the light. I just don't want to do it. And you're at the edge of a cliff and I'm like, I don't want to jump. And there's another part of me that's like, jump, you can jump. Come on, we're going to do this. And the other part's like, I don't want to do this. And it's this real battle that you're facing. But that battle, when you start understanding, what is this part that doesn't want to jump? What is this part that keeps screaming and is so fearful and scared? And when you start diving in deeper and deeper and deeper, there's so much learning there. And you start to learn, how do you hold this child self or this child part of you that doesn't want to jump? And how can you compassionately work together to move forwards? And I think that's where you show up very differently, because you're no longer afraid of all these different what ifs and you don't run off with all these different what ifs.
Absolutely. And there's, even when we start to step into the light and be a light worker, which I think is really all of us, when we start to be a light worker, there are loyal forces of the opposition, if you will. We might call it darkness, negativity, the devil, whatever we want to call it, that come against us. But to pretend that doesn't exist, I think, is short-sighted. But to be afraid of it is to also pretend the light is not stronger. There's a lot of darkness on the planet. We have wars, we have politics, we have all that, pandemics, we have all that. But the light, there's also, in my experience, much more light on the planet than ever before as well. And so when we go, okay, I'm going to be a light worker, whether that's I'm going to lead the masses or I'm going to sit in my room and meditate peace into the planet, right? Both equally necessary. Things can come against us to try to stop it. But those are the moments where, rather than stopping, we go, okay, of myself, I can do nothing, not to get biblical. We have the same phrase in Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. But of myself, I can, but of the spirit and of the love, that's what through me shall heal and do the work. Therefore, I'm going to surrender and be utilized and be a conduit of divine intent.
Oh, wow. That is so beautifully said. Did you just say that? Did you memorize that? Where did that come from?
I memorized that.
So beautiful.
I only just met you 42 seconds before we started recording. I didn't even have that.
I was like, wow. I need to write this down. This is beautiful. Beautiful.
No, sweetie, it's come from being a certain age and doing this work forever. And it is in part the angelic, because angels are messengers of God. So it is not constant, I can't claim that. Consistent practice and letting them speak through. Letting God speak through.
How beautiful.
That's actually my second book is You're a Messenger of God, is the working title.
I love that. I'm literally going to be the first one to buy that. I'm like, I need to see, I want to take this away. Do you find, this is a really random question, but it's come in my head. Do you find that people get scared sometimes that you can speak to spirit?
Of course. Yeah.
What do you notice? Like, I know that people, when they find out I'm a psychologist, they'll run a mile. But what happens when people realize that you can speak to spirit? What do they tend to do?
I don't mean to be silly, but I do have people going, like, even my own staff going, are you reading my mind right now? I'm like, no, no, I would be, really crazy if I opened that channel all the time. I think it's a fear of the esoteric and a fear of the mysterious. I don't think I'm very scary. I think I'm pretty unscary.
You're not
I'm really
scary.
not scary. No.
No.
No, I ask my sons. I'd like to be more scary to my sons, but alas, I am not scary. They would be the first to say that.
No.
Um, I really hope, and my prayer is that through our work, through your beautiful book, which the title says everything, and I'm going to go order that. You're going to have to tell me how, because I have lots of people I want to give it to. Myself first.
Oh,
It's
bless
true.
you.
I'm not just saying that. It's true. I think that our work, our passion, not to speak for you, but the work of light workers is to demystify the mystical, not to go, oh, only us psychics and clairvoyants and psychologists can do it. But you, beloved, stay at home, beautiful mom who's raising God through the bodies of your children. You are a purveyor of mysteries. You are a light worker. Like, let's make it accessible. And yeah, there's mysteries, and yeah, there's sacred schools. And yes, I'm not taking away from that at all. But I'm saying,
Hmm.
let's include everyone in this collective of consciousness.
And that goes full circle again, doesn't it? It's like we're all human. We're all the same. We are all like, yes, we're all living different lives, but yet it's treating each other with kindness rather than saying, nope, this is more me, or I'm not doing that, or I'm not. It's like, actually, let's just not judge people by the way that we continue to see them, because it's just a reflection of us, what we're seeing and how we're judging. But it's trying to look beyond that at their human beings. So when we look at a mother at home, there's so much that she is going through as a mother at home, raising children. Why is she going to be any different to someone else who is on stage speaking to thousands of people? We're all human. We're all energetic beings. We're all helping and supporting in one way or another. And it becomes a ripple effect in life.
100%. And one of my favorite expressions, if not the favorite, from my teacher is he passed away about 9 years ago. His name was John Roger. Is ordinariness is the prior condition to God. Ordinariness, called like we're all the same. This is not to take away from one of my personal heroes. Is not to get political, but Barack Obama. Because of his bravery, right? And to be the first, and so just all to say that we are all the same, right? Can we? And the angelic is in a collective, by the way. It's in a collective consciousness, and so the two worlds merges that collective consciousness, that service consciousness, with the sovereign human co-creator courageous self, creating an evolved being who is independent and again a co-creator, but who is also keenly aware that we're all born of the same matter, the same spirit.
Beautiful. Again, I could listen to you forever and ever. And you know what? You're gonna become a friend. Like,
Yes,
I already know it.
absolutely.
You're going to become a friend. Like you're in this category now. Like everything that you're saying, it just speaks to me, and my mind's just like blown in so many different directions, because I'm like, yes, there's more people like this who, like we said, are light workers. and are here to make the world a different place. But it's also through the experiences that we've been through, and everyone has their own experiences. And it's not to fight away from them experiences, but to start noticing what is it that's going on in the world in front of me and things that I've been through, and starting to understand, like, what is it that your teachings are? What wisdom have you taken away now from these things to really step into a very different space where you fully embody who you are and show up and not dim yourself down, but really powerfully said, giving yourself that permission to move forwards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to allow the light to shine through you.
I love that as well. Like, even that, I've got this image of just the light coming down and just going straight through and coming all the way, and just you feeling it. Like, you know, when you're in Tadasana, the yoga pose where you're at the front of your mat and you're really just stepping in and you're really truly in that. It's such a powerful pose. And when we stand there with that power, it's like you just feel the light with it going all the way through you. It's just very powerful. You just feel yourself on the earth. It's very
Absolutely. And you know, I've learned much more recently the power of grounding. Like, we need to be grounded and rooted, and that will allow us to soar even higher.
yeah. How beautiful as well. It's like, again, if we think of a tree is grounded. A tree has its roots grounded, and it can keep growing and growing and growing the more it's been nurtured. So we can learn so much as well from nature, and taking away things that we need to help ourselves on this journey.
Absolutely. I wrote my entire first book outside. I mean, I'm literally outside right now. And as you know, I have a studio and the Wi-Fi went down, so it's perfect that I'm outside. But, you know, for a tree to grow taller, it has to sink its roots deeper. That's I think, an African proverb. It's a common saying, but it's really true.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, my brain's just blown with that as well. I'm like, that's fascinating. But Alisha, thank you so much. Thank you for just sharing your wisdom, for being here today and sharing part of your story. I'm blessed to hear. And when we first started talking, I'm smiling because as soon as you said, I'm Indian, I'm half Indian, I was like, oh my goodness, we have to talk about this. But it just feels like there's so many more synergies there, and I'm really excited to learn more. And also just to read your book, which is coming out. Is it next year?
April of 2025, April 8th of
So
2025.
1 year. I'm sure there's some numbers there, and there's some messages in them numbers.
In the number, oh yes, probably. Well, it was Valentine's Day, but it got moved to April 8th, so I'm sure that's perfect. Let's see, numerology, 8, 9, 10, 11.
8, 4, 25. I'm sure there's something
Well,
there.
2 plus 5 is 7, spiritual fulfillment. So there we go.
There we
There we
are.
are. Yes. So
Yeah.
lovely to meet.
And Alisha, no, likewise. But before we end, we're not going anywhere yet. Before we end, I always ask everyone this one question just before we end. And that is, do you feel life is fair?
That's such a great question. You're the great question queen. Do I feel life is fair? I feel life. Can I just allow spirit to speak through me?
Yeah, go for it. I'm going to be immersed in this response.
What I hear is life is indeed fair in that we get exactly the experience our soul has called forward. Sometimes it doesn't feel fair because it's not what we are consciously wishing to call forward, but always and every moment, life is only manifesting that which our inward consciousness has called forward to teach us, to move us ever more into the light, and to bring us all the way home to God. Life is ultimately fair, though, of course, we have compassion upon people who are being seemingly victimized, and I don't take 1 ounce of compassion and love or prayer from them. But ultimately, God is love, and each experience is the purveyor of divine intention if we would but take an extra moment to unpack that. to mine all that occurs for our upliftment and learning. So it's both and. Life seems unfair if we look at just this moment and this time. But if we step back and are not quite so myopic, life is always gathering itself unto itself to learn, to heal, and to love.
That that was beautiful. Again, did you memorize that? That was just, it flowed so beautifully. I was like,
I did not memorize that. That is speaking from spirit, which again is going to be my second book. And it's what we all do when we give over.
Yeah, I can really see workshops working beautifully in that way. It's like just speaking through spirit. It's allowing ourselves to be in flow and connect and be that channel.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey there! Are you ready to take your personal growth journey to the next level? I'm really excited to announce that my new online course is finally here. And in this course, we deep dive into topics we explore on this podcast, but with even more in-depth lessons, practical exercises, and personalized guidance. Don't miss out on this opportunity to invest in yourself and unlock your full potential. Enroll now and join me on this life-changing journey.